Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on? YouTube Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really special sort of combination knife overview and discussion topic to share with you guys. These are both Zero Tolerance 0392 factory custom models. These are discontinued, and these are not the only variants. Actually, there are quite a few different variants. There's, green and black, there's bronze and gold, and there's ones with blue. There's a whole bunch of different ones out there with different blade shapes. These were part of a very special factory custom collaboration with Rick Hinderer, and we're going to talk all about it because, in my opinion, this was the greatest thing that ever came out of Zero Tolerance, and I feel like it's a huge reference point, in terms of what I want to see ZT return to. This is not going to be so much a review, because these are all discontinued. They are long discontinued. If you want to pick one of these up, you're going to have to seek it out on the secondary market, and you're going to have to deal with secondary market prices. I will give you all of the information because these are some of my favorite folding knives that have ever existed. And as you guys know, I'm very much interested in being sort of a central hub for Hinderer information, so that people can come in and find out as much as they want about Hinderer knives and all the different versions. The bottom one here was sent by my buddy Daniel, and then the top one here was sent by my buddy Hunter, and that's at Leith_Blades on Instagram. Please give him a follow. It's because of people like him that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. It is also absolutely because of my generous patrons, which I'm going to represent by stickers here, if I can pick them up. Thank you so much to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. If you'd like to, check out my Patreon and these cool stickers, there is, of course, a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. Okay, so this knife was manufactured by Zero Tolerance, and a lot of people are like, that looks really familiar. Didn't they do a knife like that at, here recently? It's, I think most people know, but for those of you who don't, yeah, the ZT0393 was the recent production variant of this knife. Now, that knife, has titanium and G10 and comes in, S35VN and 204P, right? It is much newer, but it is also a knife that there's more of a machine process and less of human interaction. As far as I understand, the ZT Knives Factory Custom program, there's a little more attention, a little more human interaction, right? A little extra that goes into it. So the knives that come out of the factory custom program oftentimes are more expensive, and it is justified. But keep in mind that the prices we're going to talk about came from a time period that was a few years back, right? So there's some adjusting, right? And on top of that, again, the secondary market will determine what these are worth now, and they are continuously going up. I'll tell you guys right off the bat, originally, these knives, as they continue, they would do, like this one was first, and then I can't remember what order when the Wharncliffe came around. But I think they made like 500 of each or something around there. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. And then after they were gone, there'd be a little bit, and then they would come out with a different variant, right? And then once they were sold out. So secondary market prices have gone up and down on these, but originally I think all of these were available starting out at about $390. And I've seen these on the secondary in absolutely perfect condition, or so they're listed, right? Anywhere from about $450 all the way up to, sometimes people who post stuff on eBay are a little crazy. I'm not saying they go for this. I've seen them as high as $800. What should you pay? It's secondary market. You pay what you want, right? If you see value in it, I'll talk about this, and hopefully I can offer some clarification. Before we get too much further, because it's already been 4 minutes, let's go ahead and measure these guys. Overall length of the ZT0392 is coming in at 8 1/4 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at, it's actually about 3.6. Cutting edge is coming in just shy of 3.5, maybe 3.4 inches. It's meant to resemble the Rick Hinderer Eclipse model. The funny thing is that just within the last couple of weeks did Rick Hinderer put the Triway in the Eclipse. The Tri-Way system being the system that allows you to switch out the internal hardware to, between bearings, phosphor, bronze, and nylon, right? So just now is that knife, in terms of, because, everybody wants bearings, everyone wants the tuned detent, right? Just now is the Eclipse actually matching, the internals of these guys. These guys are running on bearings. They have the steel lock bar insert. But back then, when these guys were prominent, part of the reason why these were so popular is because, number one, it allowed people to actually get their hands on a very close to the real thing Hinderer, right? A lot of people would argue it was better than the real thing because, number one, it ran on bearings and had a steel lock bar insert, which at the time, the Rick Hinderer version of this knife and all Rick Hinderer knives were running on nylon, did not have the steel lock bar insert, and didn't really have that great of flipping action. Number two, it was using titanium. Number three, it was in 204P. Hinderer knives mainly was S35VN, and people were like, just undeniably 204P, M390, and 20CV are better than S35VN. So a lot of people were like, yeah, this is the better Hinderer, right? I mean, 0562 aside, believe me, I understand that. That's thrown in there as well. But yeah, that was the case there. Or this is what it represents. The Eclipse, a lot of people don't notice, the Eclipse was actually planned to be and I mean, it still is, it still sells. The Eclipse, I think the intention was that, I think Rick thought it might be more popular than the XM18. It was meant as like an evolution of it. The XM18 just became such a cornerstone flagship model, and its popularity is still like, I mean, you guys know I'm a massive Hinderer fan, right? It's still like the most popular model from Hinderer knives. The Eclipse is an amazing model, but it has a lot of, the design in the body, the lines and everything. Yeah, I mean, this knife is in a lot of ways an upgrade, versus the XM18. Anyways, let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here. We're going to pull this guy out so we're not bumping everything into each other. This is a full-size knife. It is exactly the size that I like to carry. So up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. I need to loosen that pivot up on that guy. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. The camera angle is making them look maybe exactly the same, but trust me, the Rat is actually longer than the 0392. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 almost exactly the same length as the 0392, coming in at 8.3 inches overall. It is, though, now that I'm looking at it, it's a little bit off. We're going to measure this again to make sure. Yeah, it's 8.25. It's just the angle that I'm standing, the angle I'm looking at it. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7.25 inches overall. So how's the action on this guy? Zero tolerance kind of paved the way back in 2013, 2014 for good flipping action on a high-end American production knife. And I think, truthfully, after, like, the ZT flipping action is now just kind of the flipping action that you feel in, all of these production knives, whether they be high-end production knives or low-end budget knives. That level of detent about here, what I'm feeling in the ZT0562, right, this ZT0392, that level of detent was like manufactured and it was absolutely, that's what I feel in everything now, right? It seems crazy to think that, makers and production companies couldn't get that right. There were very few who were getting it exactly right back then. ZT was, there was a thing to say, it's got flipping action really similar to a ZT, because ZT they did it right. And this was one of the knives that really emphasized that. It was a lot of different things that people really wanted wrapped up into one knife. And they executed this really, really well. And these sold really, really well. And they are still super popular. Basically what I'm saying is that every 0392 that I've ever handled, which is now 4 at this point, these two, and then I've owned 2 for myself, my ZT 0392 BLK, which is the black one. And by the way, this is the original. This is the first one. So it's just the 0392. And then this is the Wharncliffe variant. So it's the 0392 WC. Each one has its own, code there with letters. So I own the BLK, which was actually the very last one that they made, which was exactly this, but completely and totally blacked out. And then I also owned a ZT 0392 GRN BLK, which was the green-black variant, had the same blade shape, had a two-tone blade kind of like this, but it was this blade shape. Then it had the black scales and the black hardware. It's very interesting. That's actually my favorite one. But that one had some detent lash, which is very unlikely on it. You know, it was a bad secondary market experience, which we're going to talk about. That's something you have to be careful about when you're buying these knives, or any knives in the secondary market that are discontinued. So I've handled 4 of these, and they are all very consistent in terms of flipping action, in terms of fit and finish. I had kind of a rogue issue with the detent lash, but it's not something, you know, these are put together super well. They all have excellent flipping action, even by today's standard. You can see the Wharncliffe one is essentially the exact same idea. There's just a little bit of encouragement needed to get it to come shut. This one actually is a little bit older and seems to be a little bit more broken in. So it's almost completely fall shut. As is the case with all Hinderer knives and most ZT knives, you can just slightly adjust them, and it'll you know, yield you know, the action that you're looking for. The action's amazing. You'll still be satisfied, even if you're somebody who's handled a lot of knives in the same price range today, and you're thinking of it, you know, I want to go after this, but I'm not sure. Is it going to be up to par, you know, with what I expect? Yeah, the action feels really, really good. All right, and let's go ahead and do some carry profile comparisons here. So up against the Spyderco Para 3, you can see there it is thicker. It's the same thickness as a Hinderer XM18 or Eclipse. So you're going to have about 165 thousandths or 160 thousandths on the blade, I think is what ZT did. I mean, we can measure it real quick here. And then the scales are typical Hinderer thickness, which I think is probably about 145 thousandths. It's a thick boy. I mean, not like Medford thick, but it's thick. 155,000, so it's actually more typical ZT. Just a little bit thinner than an actual Hinderer blade. But yeah, I mean, it's fairly thick. And these guys were not milled out. In fact, let me look at this one. I don't believe my black one was milled out. I don't believe any of them were milled out, which was the case with the Hinderer versions, you know, and the tie scales. Like, I've still got my titanium scale from my XM18. It's only recently did Rick Hinderer started to mill out his own full titanium knives, right? So this just wasn't a factor so much back then. ZT now, of course, mills out, you know, on full tie knives, they mill out the internals. And I think if these were still being made today, that would absolutely be the case. So carry profile up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3, 2 knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see here that, I mean, the 0392 is a big knife, but again, if you're used to carrying Hinderer knives or full-size knives, it's not going to really be a whole lot different here. I mean, it's got a flipper tab, but the nice thing about this Eclipse body is that there's that, it kind of sinks in right here. So it hides a lot of, you know, the excess that would be of the flipper tab. You know, if the frame came straight down like this and kind of like it does on the actual Hinderer. I've got an XM24 here that I can use as an example. I wish I had an XM18 or one of the new Eclipses. That would have made this video really great, but unfortunately I don't. But yeah, see on the XM24 here and the XM18 3.5 and 3 inch, the flipper tab is super prominent, sticks way out there. Not so much on the 0392 and Eclipse, but yeah. This item is not an item that's going to be super friendly in athletic shorts, leather pants, skinny jeans, anything like that. But if you're used to carrying other full-size knives, this is going to be right in the same ballpark. I'm going to guess these weigh about 5 1/4 to 5 1/2. No, 5.82. So actually they weigh about half an ounce more than I felt like they did. I think that's understandable considering, you know, how much titanium is on this knife, you know, the materials and everything like that. Could they have milled it out and made it weigh a little bit less? Yeah, but it's kind of, at this point, it's kind of pointless to talk about on these because, again, they're discontinued. I don't really care. I regularly carry knives between 4 and 6.5 ounces. It's way more about carry profile to me. So, you know, if you're used to carrying the Para 3 lightweight and the bug out, then, you know, you're not really going to like this. But I intentionally have kept my... You guys have to understand, if it seems like I'm really dragging and getting rambly with this, I've been waiting to talk about these knives for so long, and I'm rambly anyway. So, yeah, this is going to be a longer video. I intentionally kept my full titanium unmilled XM18 scale because all the new ones are milled and I don't want the milling. I want the density, I want the heft. I do not care if the knife ends up being over 6 ounces in the final build. I like that. So I am naturally drawn to these knives because they represent a time period in the knife world for me that is very, it was a happy time because ZT was making a lot more of the stuff that everybody, you know, misses and wants them to make right now. It was during a time where I was being, you know, perpetually drawn towards Hinderer knives and, you know, everything that they were still growing and expanding. They were popular and there was high demand for them, but they weren't as nearly as well known as they were right now. And ZT was heavy in collaboration with Hinderer. The 0550, the 0560, the 0561, the 0562, right? Then the 0392 series, right? I mean, I'm missing stuff. There's even more in there, you know, with Kershaw and things like that. And it just launched Hinderer knives, you know, and I was right in the middle of this. And that's in a lot of ways, these knives represent what started my obsession with Hinderer knives and I mean, everything that I like about them. I remember looking at the Eclipse and going, fat chance I'll ever get one of those. And then finding out that, you know, the 0392 existed and that it was basically a full-tie Eclipse on bearings. And I was like, I want that. But anyways, okay. So you know, we can do I would do a hardware check. Shameless plug. We Torx magnetic stubby bit driver and bit selector, 2 items that are extremely inexpensive and extremely recommendable. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I referenced at the beginning of every video. Just pull up in the store and look for my knife maintenance section. But essentially what we're looking at here is a combination of, I think, funny enough, I think they're T6. And then we've got the flathead pivot. You know, they're like, oh, it's Banterside, it's a proprietary system. It's not. Notch and a penny and another penny or a flathead screwdriver and some T6 screw bits, you can get in there. But that's what you're working with there. This is actual Hinderer hardware out of the Hinderer factory. So they had to create, and for those of you wondering, right, can I take that ZT0392 titanium scale and put it on my actual Eclipse? No, you can't. The screws are actually from the Hinderer factory, right? And they are modular with the actual Eclipse, and I think some other knives actually. And so is the pocket clip, the filler tab, stuff like that. But the scale itself up here is meant to fit the lugs or the external stops that are very much like the 0562. More not super functional as, you know, thumb studs, even though you can totally use them. The shape up here is different to catch those external stops versus the actual thumb studs that come on the Eclipse. So no, you can't take this scale and put it on an Eclipse, but there are titanium scales out there for the Eclipse. People always ask about that, so I thought I'd point that out. But yeah, the hardware is absolutely from the Hinderer knives, you know, the Hinderer factory. And you know, whether you agree with it or not, that's expensive hardware. If you want a full set of titanium hardware, which that's what this is, guys, you want a full set of titanium hardware from Hinderer knives, it costs you over $100. Just that stuff right there. Add on top of that, we're looking at full titanium and some pretty hefty dimensions. There's some extra fitment. There's some. It's my understanding that these are hand fitted, hand tuned, hand assembled, right? All of that's checked, which is why I see so much consistency whenever I handle one of these knives. So yeah, that was part of what went into the price. And truthfully, again, I mean, even looking back, it's like, that's a really good deal. $390 versus, even at base price, a Hinderer back then, $425. You're getting G10 with a titanium liner. You're getting nylon. You're not getting the best flipping action in the world back then. You're not getting the steel lock bar insert, and you're not getting 204P. Now, you know, a lot of this stuff, you know, arguments in terms of what you benefit in you know, utility in the end, you could argue all day. But you have to understand, with Hinderer knives back then going for $600, $700, $800 in the secondary market because nobody could get a hold of it, by contrast, this was just a better deal all the way around. Would that price fly today? I don't know. Maybe. To me, this is, you know, it's up there. I mean, it's somewhere, to me, it's, if you guys want to know, versus other things that I've handled by today's standard, this is still about a $350 knife. Is it a $400 knife? I don't know, you know, but $350 would just, I would be like, heck yeah, let's go for it. You know, anywhere between $350 and $400 if it was made, you know, today I would jump on it. And as a Hinderer fan, that's me not being a Hinderer fan and just trying to objectively view this thing, right? As a Hinderer fan, I probably would pay more. In fact, I've proven that I will, because I'll tell you guys right now, both for my black one and for the 0392 BLK GRN, I paid more than $400 for it. Anyways, though, yeah, on this bad boy, we've got tumbled titanium. It is very similar, or much more similar to Hinderer's working finish. Beautiful. The blue anodized hardware is beautiful. The pivot in this case actually seems to have a little bit of almost purple on it. And that's just part of it. You know, when you get anodized hardware from Hinderer, sometimes there's variation in the colors a little bit, and I think that gives it character. You can see there on the standoffs, same thing, some blue, some purple, right? The pocket clip is nice and blue. Everything matches. What's cool is on the on these guys, they actually have, so on a standard Hinderer, you've got the pocket clip and you've got the filler tab space, right? So here's a XM24 pocket clip filler tabs. Same size. I could literally take this pocket clip and switch it with this one. They are exactly the same size. It doesn't matter that this is a 24 and it's an XM18 and this is more of an Eclipse body. This is actual Hinderer hardware, and these things are modular. So is the LBS. These screws are specific to the Eclipse, so it's not the same thing as what comes on a 24 or an XM18, but they are modular with other actual Hinderers that take the exact same hardware. But anyways, the cool thing is you've got filler tab space, pocket clip space, and then you flip it over to the other side and there's another filler tab. I think that's really cool. A lot of people view that as totally unnecessary, but the nice thing is that lefties could actually enjoy this versus the standard XM or Eclipse. It was like, sorry, these are made for right-handed people. So it is a right-handed frame lock, right? But lefties can still enjoy and manipulate this thing, which I think was a really good move. And I think, you know, it's something that, I don't know that it made more sense because it's high scale, but whatever. Let's talk about that blade shape. Can you get an actual Hinderer knife for that blade shape? No, that is actually unique. That started off, if you go back to the Hinderer Knives website, you can see the original custom of this knife. That blade shape was a custom blade grind. It was only available as a Rick Hinderer custom. There's a picture of one, the actual Hinderer version of this and not the ZT. And then the only time you ever got to see this blade shape was in the ZT factory custom line. They have this blade shape, they had the Wharncliffe, and then they had the Bowie. Most of them came in this blade shape, and I love this. This is an awesome blade shape, and I wish that they would bring it to, I wish Hinderer would do a tri-way Eclipse with this blade shape. And I wish he'd make titanium scales for it so I could recreate this knife and pay way too much money for it. But I would, absolutely. I'd like to also see Hinderer do some of these other blade shapes. He's got a Harpoon Tanto right now, which is pretty epic, but I'd like to see the Wharncliffe on there. I actually talked with this on, I talked with Rick Hinderer on Scott Whittington's live stream on Instagram, and I said, you should totally put the Wharncliffe blade on the new Eclipse Tri-Ways because that would be really cool. It'd be like the old 0392 WCs. And he said, yeah, actually, I was just thinking that would be really cool. So that's not a confirmation, guys, but possibly we might see that from Hinderer. Anyways, we're talking about the 0392. Blade shape is amazing. You can't necessarily get, so a lot of people are probably wondering, you know, so can you get every blade shape on every body with every different type of hardware? No. Each one had its own specific style. So all 0392 WCs had this beautiful, we haven't talked about this yet. I want this finish on Hinderer knives or ZT. I don't know what this is. It's like vapor blasted gunmetal titanium. And I have never seen this finish on anything else other than just this. It is not tumbled. It's like polished and it's darkened. It's like a dark smoky gray with a polish. Oh boy, that is nice. That is not available on any other ZT knife, any other Hinderer knife. That is totally unique to this particular model. And then we have the blacked out hardware. This one actually has a black pivot barrel, which would have been great on my Hinderer XM24 because mine's, you know, the steel color and you can't buy those parts. But that's beautiful. All titanium. Right, yeah, the fit and finish on these things is just amazing. All the edges, everything's nicely knocked down. The Eclipse does not have, or the 0392 does not have that terrible jimping down here that other Hinderer knives have. And that means that even though this does have the Hinderer flipper, on this guy, it's actually knocked down a little bit, so it's not nearly as uncomfortable as some Hinderer knives. but your landing zone is so much better, right? So it still does its job as the guard, but your landing zone is much easier to deal with, in terms of your fingers. The only excess jimping is over here, which is fine. That doesn't really bother my hand at all. The blades on this guy, everything's nicely knocked down. This is a tumbled blade. I just bumped the camera. Sorry about that. All of these blades are always done perfectly. No wonkiness in the edge. 204p. I have no idea what the heat treat, numbers were on these guys. This is 204p. I'm going to guess they did it right. Our ZT's had some issues with some, like their S35VN, I think was a little soft. I don't know about these guys. But they, it is premium. Same thing as M390 and 20CV. You can see there it says 0392 Hinderer Design Kai USA CTS 204p and then the serial number. And so each one had a serial number, I think, between 1 and 500 for each model. I always complain about that paragraph they put on there. For me, it's like all that information is important as an enthusiast because particularly with these knives, I want to know the serial number. I want it to, it's an identification thing. And for anybody who's still here at the freaking 25-minute mark, guys, these are counterfeited off the charts. Do not buy clones. Do not sell or trade clones. You're part of the problem if you're doing that. Clones are rampant, and people use these knives to take advantage of people on the internet. So by buying, selling, and trading these knives, even when you know that they're a clone, and you're like, oh, but it's a, it's similar, and I'm saving some money. Yeah, but you are, by the whole butterfly effect thing, you're fueling the fire here because you're creating the incentive for these things to continue to exist, and it becomes that much more likely for somebody to go, hey, the real versions of these go for so much money, right? Maybe I can, yeah, don't do that. I'm showing you guys right now exactly what the real one looks like, and all the fakes out there, while they are similar, they don't have the exact same characteristics. This hardware is very difficult to duplicate because the Hinderer stuff is very, very specific. Fit and finish is always going to be better on these. I mean, even with the Chinese manufacturing being really, really good, these guys have a distinct level of fit and finish. The fake ones on these guys, oftentimes they'll have a satin blade, and even the tumbling pattern is a little bit different than this. The font will always look like this. It'll always have a serial number on it. It'll always say exactly this. It won't say anything different, right? ZT logo always looks a certain way on the real ones and always looks weird and kind of stamped impressed on the fake ones, right? The fake ones, get out of here with that clone stuff, man. It just drives me crazy. But yeah, they are. So just be careful, right? Don't pay a whole bunch of money for something that isn't the real thing. Buying the real thing is always the better, whether or not you need to spend that much money on a knife is out of the, decide that for yourself. But if you're going to buy one of these, obviously nobody wants to be taken advantage of. So make sure that you're actually buying the real thing if you decide to do it. The interesting thing about the WC version is that it has this unique filler tab. And I don't know why they decided to do that on this guy and not the other ones. To my knowledge, this is the only one that has a totally unique filler tab. I understand that the Bowie has like almost mirror polished hardware. So the filler tabs are mirror polished and all the hardware is mirror polished. And that is not something that you see on Hinderer knives or any of the other ZT0392. So each one has something that's slightly unique that's being brought to the table, right? In terms of either the color of the hardware or the style. The original one is just the original thing that was unique about this is that it had, I guess it's the only one that has the fully tumbled blade. And the first one being the one that has the custom, that was what was special about it initially, is that it was a special custom grind from Rick Hinderer that you couldn't get on a production XM or Eclipse, right? So that's cool. On this guy, we have a satin finished blade, so there isn't a little tiny bit of excess sharpness just up here, but it's nothing crazy. Over here, yeah, there's a little bit there too. It's not that big of a deal. But we've got this perfect, the black DLC on the two-tone. It just looks wonderful. The tip on this guy, the Wharncliffes on the 0392 WC, it gets pretty thin and aggressive. It's actually thinner and more aggressive than on the actual Hinderer XM18 version of this. So be careful with that blade. On the, if you're going to buy this and use it. On the standard 0392 blade, it actually is pretty robust. So this one's going to be a little bit better at the tip, but these two blades are going to be used for different things. There are definitely things that I would much rather use a Wharncliffe for than, you know, this modified reverse Tanto, this modified drop point / reverse Tanto thing, whatever you want to call this. But yeah, flats on these guys, I mean, same thickness. Flats on this guy, or the flat runs out about 55, 60%. The flat on this guy runs out about 65 to maybe 70%. Same amount of room dropping towards the cutting edge. It's not an absolute laser beam. In fact, it's, you know, not quite as thick behind the edge as Hinderers at the time, or even Hinderers now, but still somewhat thick behind the edge. They absolutely will slice. They absolutely will just absolutely melt any EDC tasks. And these are hard use knives, so you can take them out, you can use them, you can beat on them if you want to, right? You're going to be just fine. These are absolutely made well. These knives do not bear the weight of the plague of the poor lock geometry. These knives are not in that same, you know, as far as people experiencing disengagement, right? Now, if you take this thing, right, and you put it in a vise and you beat on the spine of the blade with a sledgehammer, is it going to disengage? Yeah, but any frame lock would disengage. I'm pretty sure I could disengage a triad lock doing that. So that's stupid. Don't use that, something like that as a means of, you know, talking about whether or not the you know, it has the same failure issues. It doesn't. These 0392s, there were not reports of these things disengaging. A lot of people would say, well, it's probably because there's a lot less people out there using them. Considering how many models there were and how many different models and how many they made, right? 500 for each, and there's what, 7 of these? Yeah, I'm going to say there's enough people out there using them that we would have heard reports if that was the case. So some models through zero tolerance had the issue, some didn't. It seems to be gone. It seems to not be a thing anymore. I don't think it was the case on these guys for anybody planning to pick one of these up on the secondary market. Love the external stops. Wish that they had texturing and actually made more sense as thumb stud deployers, but they don't, so whatever, you're going to have to fight that. Fitment of everything is just perfect. How the Hinderer pocket clip sits, I mean, this isn't deep carry, but it's also not shallow carry. Actually, the Hinderer pocket clip is one of my very favorite clips that exists because it's not a bill. It's more of a swoop, which is what I talk about with the MXG deep carry clip. Would I like a version of it that was a little deeper? I guess, but I don't really have a problem with it. I love that it's modular, and I think it's great. These have the LBS discs, or the lock bar stabilizers, which is an over travel disc preventing the bar from bending out this way. And it also keeps the bar from traveling inward towards the frame while you're squeezing it. They do have steel lock bar inserts that double as secondary over travel stops. So yeah, you're not going to disengage that. And then they both lock up, I think, in pretty similar places. We'll give them both a regular flip here so you can see this one locking up at right about 50%. And this one also locking up right about 50%. And I believe they are both perfectly. There's the centering on that one. Perfect. And here's the centering on this one. Perfect. That is the case with the ones that I've handled, you know. So when you're on the secondary market and you're looking for these guys, make sure that all pictures are totally crisp. If the person's not trying to hide anything, they won't do that stupid thing that people do where they're like, oh, sorry, the images are a little blurry. Come on, it's 2020. Take a picture, right? Your device is capable of taking a clear picture, and you should take the time to take a clear picture so that people don't think you're trying to deceive people, right? I'm going to make sure, I don't want the video to stop. But yeah, anyways, you know, make sure that the picture's clear. Make sure that the blade is actually centered and they're not doing that thing where they try to tilt the camera to one side or the other and make the blade look centered. If you're selling a knife, by the way, don't do that. People can see through that. That's really shady. Don't mess with that. Pictures of the scales, pictures of the hardware, pictures of the edge. Make sure that somebody didn't try to put their own edge on it, right, and then pass it off as the factory edge, because that does reduce the value no matter what anybody says or how good they are at sharpening, right? Collectors want the original factory versions. Make sure that there's no anodization or any finished work that's been done outside of, you know, what was done from the factory, because again, no matter how good somebody is or who they are, it does reduce the value if you change it from its original form, right? Make sure you check all that stuff. Check serial numbers, check both sides, but make sure it's not a counterfeit. You know, look up online what the original versions looked like officially through zero tolerance, and then compare and contrast. If there are any differences, it looks like they switched out the hardware. Filler tab looks funny. Any of the dialogue looks funny on the blade. Or if they're taking shadowy pictures or making things look funny, or if they're reluctant to send you certain close-ups of certain things, right? Then it's probably they're probably trying to pull something over on you. It's either a clone or they're, you know, trying to, they've used it and they're trying to hide the use and they're trying to get as much money as possible, right? So look for all of those little things. I need to do another secondary market guide, you know, what to look for, you know, when somebody's trying to mess with you. But anyways, yeah, all the way around. I mean, the ergonomics on the Eclipse are, I think, head and shoulders above the XM18. I love the XM18 and XM24 ergonomics, but this just fits in the hand better. And so the ZT-0392 variant of this knife just exemplifies that really, really well. These are excellent knives. These are so excellent. It's like I said towards the beginning of the video, this is the best thing that Zero Tolerance ever did. Now, I understand that I don't know if like Rick Hinderer and Zero Tolerance are just running out the clock on their contract as far as the 0562 CF and TI go. I don't know if I know the 0393 GLCF is still running with ZT. And truthfully, that knife could have been the one that really knocked it out of the park. The idea was to bring this down to the normal production price for Zero Tolerance and to bring it to the table in the form of the 0393. The problem is the first one they released had the combination of the weird hourglass overlays, the blue underneath, and the two-tone blade. It looked like a sprint run, and it was a little bit wonky. Had they come out with a standard black G10 and tumbled blade, right? They did the Harpoon Spanto in that, right? And then they did more of a shadow boxing with the overlays, right? That would have sold like crazy. And that would have been great. And then you do all the weird ones. You can bring the sprints out and do the fun things with the colors like what these guys have going on. That's how that should have been executed. I've said that a million times. That would have been a game changer because it's like I always say, the ZT-0393 is still one of the greatest knives that ZT has ever created. They just didn't execute it properly. And it was during a time period where they were transitioning and doing some weird models. What ZT is doing right now really bums me out. This represents the greatest time for Zero Tolerance. And I understand that they may not be able to bring this exact knife back to the table, but use this knife, I guess. I don't know who I'm speaking to here. If ZT was listening, I would say, look to this knife as a reference point. It is obviously, not everybody's going to like this knife, and I understand that, but it was obviously very popular, right? Whether you like it or not, the fact of the matter is that these things still regularly sell for way more than they originally sold for. They also generally sold out pretty quickly. Absolutely. So you've got the right, blade geometry, the right aesthetics. People like how it looks. It's they're collaborating with a maker that people like, right? It's got special elements and you can absolutely use it. And it's got all the little, things that people look for in a modern folding knife, right? The action, the lock bar insert, right? The nearly fall shut action, or in some cases, I'm sure some people have some of these that are actually completely fall shut. It's got all that. These are the kind of things that ZT needs to come back to if they want to, succeed, in my opinion, in the knife world. Here's the thing. It's like, I'm sure ZT would be like, well, okay, but there are these other trends right now. People are kind of liking smaller, thinner knives that are thinner behind the edge, People like the lightweight thing, and we're trying to explore there. I think it's perfectly okay for them to explore that territory, but what made ZT great in the first place was the big, robust, overbuilt, crazy, aggressive stuff that people still really like. So it's okay to do that a little bit here and there, but the main focus should still be on knives like this. And they did it, really well in that big, the 0308? I think that was good. I think people got a little bit too bent out of shape about the hole in the middle of it, and the color was weird, but you can get custom scales for that. That's a great step in the right direction. If I were to see this knife come back, this is my ultimate fantasy. This knife comes back, right? And just for everybody's sake, just because of what people like, they mill out. Imagine with me, they keep the dimensions, but they mill out the titanium on both sides, and then they contour this like they did on the titanium side of the 0308, and they texture it. Oh God, I would die. If they did that, a lot of you guys know my quest for the perfect folding knife series, I still hold true to all those little things that I look for. If they did that, this knife would literally be Excalibur. It literally would have every single element that I was looking for. This knife was one of the knives that really painted the picture of what I look for in a knife. It's one of the most perfect knives that has ever been made, and it's not just Zero Tolerance, right? This knife, whenever I do a top 10 knife list and whatever, right? I did one in 2018, 2019, I think one here in 2020. This knife, specifically the 0392, has always made that list, and it's always very high on the list. I think this is the very best thing that ZT has ever done, and I think it's one of the greatest folding knives of all time. And I think ZT should absolutely look to this knife, right, and sort of analyze what made it popular, right, and what people were into at the time and what they're into now, and then just, evolve. Obviously, again, they may not be able to make new knives with Rick Hinderer, but I feel like, when they seek out like certain makers to collaborate with, it's kind of, use this as kind of your cookie cutter. This is a really, really good knife, and people still love this knife, and they're still very interested in it, right? When I unboxed this one, people went nuts. As far as like population on my channel or traffic on my channel, right? Yeah, people are interested in this. So these are still great, types in these dimensions. This style of folding knife is still very, very popular. I just love Hinderer knives, but I just want ZT to still be good. And these are the types of knives that can do it. But if we're not going to see this from ZT, then I really want Rick Hinderer to bring this blade shape to production form in an Eclipse. And also, I'd love you to do some contouring on your scales, Rick. But I'll still buy him anyway. I'll still buy him if not. Boy, this was the most rambling. I was serious at the beginning when I said this is kind of an overview and kind of a discussion. This isn't, I can't call it a review, right? I hope you guys got all the information you needed if you're going to pick this up on the secondary market for yourself. But I mean, yeah, this is amazing. It's one of my favorite folding knives of all time. This is going to go on my, on that playlist. It's going to go on my ZT knives playlist. It's going to go on my Hinderer knives playlist as well. I can't really say that I recommend it because you're going to have to pay more money than normal for this knife, right? So, I mean, for Hinderer fans and for people who are collectors and enthusiasts, is this a good knife to pick, functionally? Yeah, and if you can get a good deal on one, then great. Me personally, I cut it off at about $500 for an absolutely perfect variant of whatever I'm looking for. $500 is about the most that I'll go on something like that. But it hasn't popped up yet for me. A lot of people spend more money, and this is by no means meant as a reference point. You pay as much as you see fit, right? I never like the idea of people paying, a ton more for a knife on the secondary market. But I can understand, the desire for something that's no longer available. I get that. I wish that it was still available, but it isn't. And you're going to have to pay usually more money unless somebody had one that was a user, in which case, yeah, you can get these for less, right? And I've considered that before. I've seen users pop up for $300, $350. I'm thinking, I could put an edge back on that and deal with some of the scratches, right? And so, yeah, if that doesn't bother you, by all means, go that route. Sometimes they pop up on the ZT Knives Buy Sell Trade group on Facebook and our Knife Swap or whatever it is on Reddit, and blade forms, right? So sometimes you can find these. Guys, this video needs to end. This is fun. We'll be talking about these again before both of them are shipped back in probably another video. But I think that's going to be pretty much it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video or at least found it mildly entertaining, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.